Why did the richest cowboy in Dust Ridge take one look at the wrong bride and refuse to let her leave? The church doors slam open as boots scrape hard across the floor. Ethan's hand closes around hers, firm, unshaken, while the room holds its breath. A chair tips somewhere behind them. Lila doesn't pull away. She just looks at him, and the silence stretches too long. Tell me what you think is about to happen next. The train came in late, dragging heat and dust behind it like a tired animal. Metal wheels shrieked against the rails as it slowed into Dust Ridge, Colorado, the sound echoing off the low wooden buildings lining the track. Noon sat heavy over the town, the kind of heat that pressed down on your shoulders and stayed there. Ethan Brooks stood a few steps back from the platform, one hand resting on the worn leather of his saddle. His horse shifted under him, flicking its tail at flies. He didn't move, didn't wipe the sweat at his collar. He just watched the train. Folks had already gathered. Not many. Dust Ridge didn't draw crowds unless something unusual was promised. And today, there was something. A mail-order bride. Someone chuckled behind him. Low, curious, not kind. The train gave one last hiss and settled. Doors opened. A conductor stepped down first, boots hitting the platform with a dull thud. Then came a couple with carpet bags, a man in a gray coat, a woman with a crying baby. People stepped off in ones and twos, each disappearing quickly into the heat and the town. Ethan's eyes stayed on the last door. That was where she would come from. A folded paper sat in his pocket. He hadn't looked at it since morning. Didn't need to. He remembered the description well enough. Fair skin, brown hair, quiet nature, suitable. The door creaked open. A woman stepped down slowly, careful with her footing. Her dress had once been pressed, maybe cream-colored, though the journey had wrinkled it beyond saving. Dust clung to the hem. She carried a single worn suitcase, the handle wrapped in cloth where it had split. She paused at the bottom step, lifted her head, and looked straight ahead. The platform went quiet in a way that wasn't loud, but still carried, because she wasn't the woman anyone expected. Her skin caught the sun differently, deep and steady, her hair pulled back simply, no ornament, no apology in the way she stood. A few heads turned. A few didn't bother hiding it. Someone near the back let out a short laugh, then swallowed it when no one joined in. Ethan didn't move. The conductor glanced once at her, then away. No one stepped forward to greet her. No man reached out a hand or called her name. She set her suitcase down beside her boots. Waited. A breeze cut across the platform, lifting a thin line of dust between her and the rest of the town. Still, no one came. Ethan felt the paper in his pocket without touching it. He knew what it said, knew what he had paid for, knew what had been promised. But the woman standing there, she wasn't a mistake that could be folded back into an envelope and returned. The space around her widened as people drifted off, one by one. Not fast, just enough to make it clear. She was alone. Her hands stayed at her sides, not clenched, not trembling, just still. Ethan stepped forward, boots on wood, slow, measured. The murmurs picked up again, softer this time, sharper. He stopped at the edge of the platform and looked up at her. She met his gaze without flinching. No question in her eyes. No pleading either. Just waiting. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The train behind her let out a long breath of steam, then began to pull away, wheels grinding back into motion. The sound filled the silence they left between them. Ethan reached for the reins, tightening his grip slightly. He could turn around, walk back to the saddle, ride home alone, let the town settle back into its usual rhythm by supper. No one would blame him. He didn't turn. "You'll ride," he said. His voice carried just enough to reach her. Nothing more. A flicker passed through the crowd. Not loud, just enough. The woman looked at him for a long second, then down at her suitcase. She picked it up, the weight pulling slightly at her shoulder, and stepped toward the edge of the platform. Ethan took a step back, giving her room. She climbed down without help. When her boots hit the ground, a thin cloud of dust rose around them both. Up close, he could see the faint line where the sun had caught her face on the journey. The way her fingers held the suitcase handle steady, even though the leather had cut into it. "Lila Mae Johnson," she said, her voice even, as if stating it for an accord that might never be kept. Ethan nodded once. He didn't offer his name, didn't need to. He turned, leading the horse a few steps closer, untied the small roll of blankets from the back, adjusting the saddle without looking at her again. "Mount from the left," he said. She set the suitcase down, looked at the stirrup, then at him. For a moment, it seemed like she might refuse. Instead, she gathered her dress just enough, placed her foot, and pulled herself up. It wasn't graceful, but it was steady. Ethan handed up the suitcase. She set it across her lap, one arm wrapped around it. He swung into the saddle behind her in one smooth motion. The horse shifted once, then stilled. No one spoke. The town watched. Ethan clicked his tongue softly. The horse stepped forward, hooves dull against the packed dirt. They moved past the edge of the platform, past the line of buildings where men leaned in doorways and women stood behind shaded windows. No one called out. No one stopped them. Only the sound of hooves and the low wind followed. Lila didn't look back. Ethan didn't either. And behind them, Dustridge stood in the heat, holding its breath around a choice no one there would have made. The road out of town stretched thin and pale, cutting through dry land that hadn't seen real rain in weeks. Dust lifted with every step the horse took, settling on boots, on fabric, on skin. Lila sat straight in the saddle, one hand steady on the suitcase across her lap, the other resting lightly near the horn. She didn't speak. Neither did Ethan. A hawk circled high above, its shadow sliding across the ground for a moment before disappearing. They rode like that for a long while. By the time the land began to change, low fencing, a windmill turning slow against the sky, the sun had shifted just enough to take the edge off the heat. The sign at the gate leaned slightly to one side, the paint worn thin but still readable. Ironwood Valley. Ethan pushed the gate open with his boot and rode through. The hinges groaned. Inside, the land stretched wider than it had any right to. Corrals, a long barn with a tin roof, a line of cottonwoods near a shallow creek that had mostly dried down to stone. A few ranch hands looked up from their work. No one waved. They saw her. Then they looked at Ethan, then back at her. No one said a word. Ethan brought the horse to a stop near the porch. He swung down first, boots hitting dirt with a soft thud. For a second, he just stood there, hand on the reins, as if deciding something that didn't have an easy answer. Then he stepped forward and took the suitcase from her without asking. "Careful," she said quietly. He nodded once, not looking at her. She climbed down on her own. Slower this time. The long ride had settled into her legs. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stepped out. Older. Hair pulled back tight, streaked gray. Her dress plain, sleeves rolled just past the wrist. She held a ring of keys in one hand, the metal clinking softly as she moved. Martha Green. Her eyes went to Lila first, stayed there a second longer than most would. Not sharp, not soft either, just measuring. Then she looked at Ethan. "That her?" she asked. Ethan set the suitcase down by the door. She'll be staying. Martha's gaze shifted back to Lila. A small pause. Then she stepped aside and opened the door wider. Come in then. Inside, the air was cooler, shaded by thick walls and drawn curtains. The front room was clean but bare. A table, a few chairs, a shelf with ledgers stacked in uneven piles. The smell of coffee lingered, though no pot was on the stove now. Martha walked ahead, keys tapping against her palm. Room's upstairs, she said. End of the hall. Window sticks if you force it. Don't. Lila followed, her steps quiet on the wooden floor. Ethan stayed near the doorway, not coming in right away. At the base of the stairs, Martha stopped and turned. One more thing, she said, her voice low but clear. Keep your door shut at night. Lila met her eyes, gave a small nod. Martha handed her a single key. The metal was warm from her hand. Upstairs, the room was simple. A narrow bed, a wash basin, a small window looking out over the back fence and the stretch of land beyond it. The glass was slightly warped, bending the view just enough to make it feel distant. Lila set her suitcase on the bed and opened it slowly. Folded clothes, a book, a small cloth bundle tied tight. She touched each item once, as if checking they were still real. Downstairs, a chair scraped softly against the floor. Ethan. She didn't go down. Instead, she moved to the window and pressed her fingers lightly against the frame. The wood was rough, worn smooth in places by years of use. Outside, a man led a horse across the yard. Another hammered something along the fence line. Work went on, like nothing had changed. Later, when she came down, the light had shifted again. Ethan stood by the table, flipping through a stack of papers. He didn't look up when she reached the last step. There's work, he said, if you want it. She waited. He slid a ledger across the table with 2 fingers. Books don't balance, he added. Haven't in months. Lila stepped closer. The pages were thick, edges worn, numbers written in a steady hand, though some lines were crossed out, rewritten, then crossed again. She turned a page, then another. Something didn't sit right. These figures repeat, she said. Ethan shrugged slightly. So I've been told. She didn't answer, just kept reading. A breeze slipped through the open back door, lifting a loose sheet at the edge of the table. It flipped once, then settled. On the far shelf, a stack of older papers caught her eye, tied with a thin piece of twine. Those part of it? She asked. Ethan followed her gaze. His jaw tightened just a fraction. No, he said. He didn't move to stop her. Lila crossed the room, untied the twine carefully, and opened the stack. The paper was thinner, older, ink slightly faded but still clear. Not numbers. Letters. She read the first line without meaning to, then the name at the bottom. Clara Whitfield. Her fingers paused on the edge of the page. Behind her, Ethan set the ledger down with a quiet thud. Those aren't part of your work, he said. His voice hadn't changed, but the room felt different now. Lila closed the letter gently, retied the twine. I didn't think they were, she said. She set the bundle back exactly where she found it. When she turned, Ethan was watching her. Not long, just enough. Outside, a horse let out a short, restless sound, hooves shifting in dirt. Lila stepped back to the table and pulled the ledger closer. I'll start with this, she said. Ethan nodded once. No more words passed between them. But something had shifted. Not loud, not clear, just enough to be noticed. By the next morning, the change had already started. It showed up in small ways first. A pause when Ethan rode into town for supplies. A glance held a second too long. The man at the general store weighing flour saw without asking what he needed, as if waiting to hear something else. Lila didn't go in that first day. She stayed at the ranch, working through the ledgers, sleeves rolled, a pencil tucked behind her ear. The numbers began to settle under her hand. Lines that didn't belong stood out sharper now. Figures repeated where they shouldn't. Payments marked twice. Others missing entirely. She stacked the pages into neat piles, pressing them flat with her palm. Outside, the wind carried voices from the yard. "Seen her?" one of the men said. "Seen enough," another answered. Boots shifted. A cough. Then silence when the door creaked slightly on its hinges. Lila didn't look up. By afternoon, Ethan came in with a folded receipt and set it beside her work. The paper was thin, edges curled from being handled too many times. "Store's raising prices," he said. She nodded, eyes still on the page. "Accounts don't match what you've been paying," she replied after a moment. He leaned one shoulder against the table. "That's so." She turned the ledger toward him, pointed once. "Here, same amount listed twice. Different dates." Ethan looked down. His brow tightened slightly. Then he nodded. "Fix it," he said. "I will." He stayed there a second longer than needed, then pushed off the table and walked out. That evening, a wagon rolled into town that hadn't been there the day before. It was cleaner than most. Painted sides, polished wheels. A driver in a dark coat stepped down first, brushing dust from his sleeve. Then he opened the door. A woman stepped out. Her dress was a shade lighter than the dust around her. Gloves, still white despite the road. She didn't hesitate when her boots touched the ground, just lifted her chin slightly and took in the street as if nothing had changed. But it had. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-word. Clara Whitfield had come back. She didn't ask for directions, didn't need to. She walked straight toward the saloon, the door swinging open ahead of her. Inside, the piano stopped playing before she even crossed the threshold. By the time Ethan rode through town again, the news had already spread. He didn't stop, but he heard it. In the way voices lowered as he passed, in the way no one said her name out loud. Back at Ironwood Valley, the light was thinning. Lila stepped outside with a bucket, heading toward the trough. A horse near the fence shifted suddenly, pulling hard against the rope, its breath sharp, eyes rolling white. She set the bucket down, walked toward it slow. "Easy now," she said, voice low. The horse jerked again, hooves digging into the dirt. The rope strained. She didn't rush, just stepped closer, one hand lifting slightly, not touching yet. "Easy," she said again. The sound of her voice stayed even, not loud, not afraid. The horse's breathing slowed by a fraction. She reached the rope, wrapped her fingers around it, steadying it, not pulling, just holding. A man by the fence watched, didn't move to help. After a moment, the horse settled. Its head dropped just enough. Lila loosened the rope a notch, ran her hand once along its neck, then stepped back. The man at the fence gave a small nod, almost invisible. Later, when she went back inside, something waited at the foot of the stairs. An envelope. No mark on it. No name. Just her door. She picked it up. The paper was thicker than most, edges clean. It hadn't been carried far. Upstairs, she closed the door behind her before opening it. The note inside was short. "Leave before he ruins you the way he ruined her." No signature. No explanation. Just the weight of it. Lila stood there, the paper between her fingers. The room felt smaller than it had that morning. The window glass caught the last light, bending it into something uneven across the floor. Downstairs, a chair scraped. Ethan. She folded the note once, then again, set it on the small table beside the bed. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she reached for her suitcase, not opening it, just resting her hand on top of it, as if testing the thought. When she came down, Ethan was at the table again, sleeves rolled, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. He looked up once, noticed something had shifted, didn't ask. Lila crossed the room and set the ledger back in its place. "I'll go into town tomorrow," she said. "For what?" "Supplies," she answered. He nodded. Nothing more. The silence stretched. Outside, the wind picked up again, pushing against the side of the house, rattling something loose along the fence line. Lila turned toward the stairs. Halfway up, she paused, didn't look back, then continued on. Behind her, Ethan reached for the coffee, took a sip, and set it down again. Untouched, it had gone cold. The next day broke quiet. No wind, no voices in the yard, just the sound of leather creaking and a bucket hitting wood somewhere out back. Lila left early. She took the smaller trail into Dust Ridge, the one that cut past the dry creek and came up behind the feed store. Fewer eyes that way, fewer questions. Still, there were enough. Inside the store, the clerk weighed out sugar without looking at her, wrapped it in brown paper, set it down with 2 fingers as if it might roll away on its own. She paid in coins, she counted twice. No one spoke. Outside, a wagon stood near the hitching rail. Clean lines, fresh paint. Clara Whitfield stepped down just as Lila reached for her own reins. They stood a few feet apart, close enough to notice the details. Clara's gloves were still white, not a mark on them. Her dress caught the light in a way that didn't belong to Dust Ridge. "You're staying out there," Clara said, voice even. Lila tied the paper bundle to her saddle. For now. Clara's eyes moved once, slow, measuring. "He doesn't keep things long," she said. Lila didn't answer. A moment passed. Then Clara smiled, small and careful, like something placed exactly where it needed to be. "I suppose you'll find that out." She turned and walked back toward the wagon, not looking back. Lila mounted without hurry. The ride back felt longer. Clouds had begun to gather along the ridgeline, darkening the edge of the sky. By the time she reached the gate, the wind had picked up again, sharper this time, pushing against the boards until they rattled in their frame. Inside the yard, men moved quicker. Tools were set aside. Horses shifted, uneasy. "Storm coming?" someone called. Lila didn't stop at the house. She heard it first, the sharp crack of a loose board slamming against the barn wall. Then the horses. One broke its line, jerking hard, rope snapping loose. Another kicked against the stall door, hooves striking wood with a hollow thud. She dropped the bundle near the porch and ran. The barn doors were already half open, wind forcing them wide with each gust. Dust and straw lifted in spirals inside, the air thick and restless. Lila grabbed the nearest rope, catching the loose horse just as it tried to bolt past her. "Easy," she said, breath steady despite the wind pressing against her. The horse fought once, twice, then stilled just enough. Another crash sounded behind her. "Ethan." He pushed through the far door, coat already darkened by the first drops of rain. Without a word, he moved to the next stall, bracing his shoulder against the wood as a horse slammed into it from the inside. "Latch it!" he called over the wind. Lila pulled the rope tight, guiding the horse back into place. Her fingers burned where the fibers dragged against her skin. but she didn't let go. The first real crack of thunder rolled over the valley. Rain came fast after that. Hard. Cold. Driving sideways through the open gaps in the barn, they worked without speaking. One stall, then another. By the time the last latch held, both of them were soaked through. Water ran down Ethan's collar, darkening the line of his shirt. Lila's dress clung at the sleeves, heavy with rain. The wind didn't let up. It pushed against the doors until the hinges groaned. Ethan crossed the space in 2 strides and caught one side, forcing it shut. Lila moved to the other, pressing her weight into the wood until it slammed closed with a sharp echo. For a moment, neither moved. The storm roared outside, rattling the walls, but inside the barn, there was only the sound of breathing. Close now. Closer than before. Ethan stepped back first, running a hand once through his hair, pushing the water away from his eyes. "You should have stayed in the house," he said. Lila shook her head slightly. "They would have broken loose." He looked at her then, not past her, not around her, at her. Lightning flashed through the gaps in the boards, bright enough to cut the space between them into sharp lines. For a second, everything stood still. Then the light faded. "She left," he said, voice lower now. Lila didn't ask who. "She didn't wait," he added. "Didn't ask." The wind hit the barn again, harder this time, making the rafters creak. "She told them I pushed her," he went on, eyes fixed somewhere just past Lila's shoulder. "Told them I'd taken what wasn't mine. After that, didn't matter what I said." Another flash of lightning. Closer. Lila reached for the edge of the stall door, steadying it as it rattled. "You didn't answer them," she said. Ethan gave a short, almost quiet breath. "No." Rain hammered against the roof, loud enough now that words had to be held steady to carry. "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. Outside, something heavy struck the side of the barn and rolled off, then didn't see the use. Silence settled again between the bursts of thunder. Lila's hand stayed on the wood. Her fingers loosened slowly. "People decide what they want to believe," she said, "before they hear anything." Ethan's gaze shifted back to her. This time, it didn't move away. "No," he said. "They do." Another gust of wind forced its way through the cracks, lifting a loose strand of her hair. It brushed against her cheek, then settled again. For a moment, neither stepped back. The distance between them had closed without either noticing. Then a stall door banged once more, sharp enough to break the space. Ethan turned first, moving to secure it. Lila stepped away. By the time the storm began to ease, the barn had gone quiet again. The horses settled. The wind dropped to a low, steady push against the walls. Ethan opened the door just enough to look out. Rain still fell, but lighter now. The ridge beyond the fence was barely visible through the gray. "It'll pass," he said. Lila nodded. They stepped out together. Water dripped from the edge of the roof, tapping against the ground in slow, even beats. The house stood ahead, lights faint in the dimness. Lila walked toward it first. Halfway there, she slowed. Didn't turn. "Morning comes quick after storms," she said. Ethan didn't answer. She continued on. Inside, she went straight upstairs, closed the door. The room smelled faintly of damp wood. She moved to the bed, opened her suitcase this time, folded clothes one by one. Careful, quiet. When she finished, she set it near the door. By the time the first light touched the window, she was already dressed. Downstairs, the house was still. She paused at the last step, then walked to the door. Outside, the ground was wet, darkened by the night's rain. The air carried that clean smell storms left behind. She reached for the handle. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. She didn't turn. Her hand stayed on the door. Behind her, Ethan's steps stopped halfway across the room. For a second, neither of them moved. The morning light stretched thin across the floorboards, catching the edge of her suitcase. The worn leather dulled from travel. Outside, a fence creaked in the wind, still loose from the storm. "You leaving?" he said. Not a question. Lila's fingers tightened slightly on the handle. "The road's dry enough," she answered. Her voice didn't rise, didn't fall. It stayed where it was. Ethan stood there, one hand resting against the back of a chair. He looked at the door, then at her. "You don't have to." She almost smiled. It didn't quite reach her face. "I was told different." He didn't ask about the note, didn't ask who had said it. Outside, a wagon rolled past the far fence line, wheels cutting into the damp earth. "Town's meeting," he said after a moment. "Church." She let the words settle. "They'll want to hear you say it," she replied. "That I was a mistake." Ethan didn't answer. The silence stretched again. Longer this time. Lila opened the door. The air outside carried that clean, cold edge storms leave behind. The sky had cleared, but the ground still held the weight of what had passed. She stepped onto the porch. The wood gave a soft groan beneath her boot. Behind her, Ethan moved. "Faster now." "Wait." She stopped, not turning. He came up beside her, close enough that she could hear the shift of his breath. "They don't get to decide that," he said. Lila looked out toward the fence, the land stretching beyond it. "They already have," she answered. Down in Dust Ridge, the church bell rang once, then again. By the time they reached town, the street was lined. Men stood outside the saloon, hats low. Women gathered near the steps of the church, hands folded, voices quiet but sharp underneath. No one blocked the way. They didn't need to. The doors to the church stood open. Inside, every seat was filled. Ethan stepped in first. Lila followed. The room shifted as they entered. Heads turned. Whispers moved like a low wind through the rows. At the front, near the pulpit, Clara Whitfield stood beside Judge Halverson. Her gloves were back on. Perfect again. She didn't smile. She watched. Ethan removed his hat, set it down on the nearest bench, didn't take a seat. "Mr. Brooks," the judge began, voice steady, practiced. "We're here to settle a matter that concerns this town." Ethan said nothing. Clara stepped forward half a pace. "They deserve the truth," she said, "about what kind of house you're running." The words landed clean. No shouting, no force, just placed. Lila stood near the back. Her suitcase rested beside her boot, the handle upright, waiting. Ethan looked at the crowd once, then at Clara, then past all of them. "She stays," he said. The room didn't react right away. It took a second. Then the murmurs rose, sharp, disbelieving. Judge Halverson lifted a hand. "Mr. Brooks, that's not—" Ethan didn't look at him. "Or I don't," he added. That stopped it. The room held. Lila's fingers loosened on the suitcase, then tightened again. She turned, took one step toward the door. Ethan moved before she reached it. Not fast, just enough. He stepped down from the aisle, closing the space between them, and reached for her hand. The first time, his grip wasn't hard, just certain. She looked down at it, then up at him. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. Behind them, a chair scraped. An older man stood from the second row, papers in his hand. "Before this goes any further," he said, voice rough from disuse, "there's something needs saying." No one stopped him. He walked forward, slow, steady, placed the papers on the table near the judge. "Been holding on to these longer than I should have," he added. Judge Halverson frowned, picked them up, read. The room leaned in without moving. Clara didn't. She stayed where she was. Still. The judge's expression shifted. Not much, but enough. "These statements," he began, then stopped, looked at Ethan, then back at the paper. "They contradict what was said years ago." No one spoke. Clara's hand moved once at her side, just enough to wrinkle the edge of her glove. "She told them," the old man said, not raising his voice before anyone asked. The silence deepened. Ethan didn't step forward, didn't defend himself. He just stood there, his hand still holding Lila's, letting it be seen. Clara's gaze moved finally, from the papers, to Ethan, to Lila. For the first time, she didn't have words ready. The room shifted again, not loud, but different. Lila felt it, in the way no one laughed, no one looked away. She didn't pull her hand back. Ethan's thumb moved slightly against her knuckles, a small thing, easy to miss. But it stayed. Outside, the wind passed over the church roof, softer now. The bell didn't ring again, and for the first time since the train had come into Dust Ridge, the town had nothing left to say. If you stood there that day, maybe you would have felt it too. That quiet that settles in after a storm. Not just the kind that tears through wood and sky, but the kind that moves through people. The kind that asks you who you are when no one's speaking for you. Lila didn't come to be chosen. She came because she had nowhere else to go, and Ethan, he didn't stand beside her to prove anything. He just didn't step away. Sometimes that's all it is. Not grand words, not promises written down. Just staying when leaving would be easier. If you've ever been the one people looked past, or the one who kept quiet while others filled in your story for you, then you know how much it costs to stand still and say, "This is where I belong." Not because the world agrees, but because you do. There's something about second chances that don't announce themselves. They just show up, quiet, uninvited. And if you're not careful, you might miss them. So tell me, would you have walked away that morning or stayed? And if this story found a place in you tonight, there are more like it waiting. Stories about people who didn't turn back, even when the road gave them every reason to. You're always welcome here.